it is the events or the beginning of a series of events that we desperately hoped would not happen. And we must be in no doubt at all that Russia has now put herself into an extremely dangerous position. And even if Mr. Putin tries to call these focused and targeted operations, we must be in no doubt that this is a major invasion and we must treat it as such. And the reaction by the West must be as strong as it possibly can be in terms of economic sanctions, international isolation as far as Russia is concerned, and we must all expect to take some pain. Fuel prices will rise, cost of living will rise. We will all take some pain in this. It's a very dark day for Europe, and our leaders must be in no doubt that they've got to put maximum pressure on Mr. Putin.
It's a dark day for the armed forces as well, General, isn't it? I mean, in the sense that there is no indication at this time that we are going to engage with Russian forces. That would bring a whole new world of pain upon us all. But we're deployed to nearby states. We know a lot of people are on standby. A lot of troops were recalled yesterday. This is a concerning time for them and their families.
Yes, of course, you're absolutely right. But we must keep a very clear distinction between what is going on in Ukraine and what potentially could go on in the rest of Europe. The other nations of Europe, many of which we've talked about on this programme before, such as Estonia and Poland, that the UK has been supporting, are countries that we will continue to support because they are NATO members. And it may well be that the UK armed forces deploy in larger numbers to support our friends in those NATO countries in Eastern Europe. What's going on in Ukraine is different. As we've said many times, it's different because NATO is not, is that Ukraine is not a NATO member. This fight is Ukraine's fight, and Ukraine is going to have to fight Russia on her own, albeit we're giving her moral support, military weaponry support, but this fight is Ukraine's fight. That doesn't mean to say that we should in any sense lessen our opposition and vilification of Russia in the round. Russia has crossed the Rubicon in the major way that we hoped would not happen, but clearly has happened. And that's why the economic pressure, the international isolation pressure on Russia must be intense, immediate, huge and lasting. But I have to say, I do worry from some of the reports that I'm hearing from inside Ukraine. Even yesterday, we were hearing that Ukraine has not ordered full mobilization. Now, full mobilization means getting their units themselves ready for war. There's been a lot of talk about Ukrainians fighting and fighting hard, and that's good. But I'm worried if they've not fully mobilized their units, that this could be a lightning strike by Russia. It could well be successful. But the West must not in any way misunderstand that whether the Ukrainians fight hard or whether the Ukrainians don't fight hard, this is foul war in Europe in the 21st century, and it places Russia absolutely at the bottom of the league of any nation that any sensible nation wants to talk to. This is bad news for the world, and certainly bad news for Russia at the present moment today.
Interested to hear, I mean, you say this is a dark day for Europe, and yet you stress that this is a war for Ukraine. It's not for us at this stage. Does it matter to an extent what the motives are of President Putin? I mean, if this is about occupation or perhaps about regime change, does that change things, do you think?
No, I don't think so. This is what he would like us to understand, and he would like us to try and apply a nuanced response. But what we've been saying all along is that if Russia invades in any meaningful fashion, that will have been a crossing of the Rubicon, a crossing of the line, and Russia must expect the full force of sanctions, international isolation, and vilification from the West. There's no point us being gradual about this or nuanced about this. He has crossed the line and he's beyond the pale now. If we step back from that, then he will undoubtedly have won. He must not win. He must lose and must be made to pay.
Is this an indication that we just haven't done enough over recent years? I mean, particularly with what we saw in Crimea in 2014. Are we sort of reaping the cost of a very lacklustre international response last time?
Well, you could argue that, and I think that's something that historians can argue in time to come. I think the important thing is to focus on the here and now, what is going on now, and being very clear that Russia has crossed a line. The West's response must be massive in political, economic, and diplomatic terms, and that this is something from which Russia will not recover easily and has set her own development back considerably.